But beyond the glitz and glamour, entertainment history has always made room for beauty that breaks every stereotype. Faces that are unique, haunting, and impossible to ignore. Picture skin that seems to melt like candle wax, eyes so large and unblinking they feel as if they stare straight into your soul, and mouths shaped in ways nature rarely dares to create. Join us as we uncover 13 Black celebrities whose faces stand among the strangest in history, where unforgettable appearances shatter conventional beauty standards and push the very boundaries of the human form. Screamin' Jay Hawkins, the demon-haunted face and those grotesquely bulging eyes. Picture yourself in a pitch-black theater in the 1950s. A cloud of white smoke curls through the air. The lid of a coffin creaks open, slowly, deliberately, until suddenly a man snaps upright, unleashing a scream that tears straight through the night. That was Screamin' Jay Hawkins, a performer who didn't just take the stage. He possessed it, commanding every eye with a presence both terrifying and hypnotic. What made Jay truly unforgettable, what turned him into a figure of pure dread, were his eyes. They weren't merely large, they bulged outward in a state of feral madness, locked in an unblinking, savage stare. In grainy black and white footage, cameras often caught him rolling those eyes back until the pupils vanished completely, leaving only a cold, murderous white. His mouth would stretch to the very limits of his face as he unleashed his legendary voodoo shrieks, sounds that felt less sung than summoned. More bizarre, and more chilling still, Jay often pierced his nose with a human bone, amplifying the sense that what stood before the audience was not a man, but something ancient and otherworldly. With his sharp, angular features and those protruding, unhinged eyes, Screamin' Jay Hawkins looked like a sorcerer torn straight from the darkest folklore. Alive, screaming, and impossible to forget. Blind Willie Johnson. Blind Willie Johnson. The chemical punishment behind those limestone eyes. In the shadowed world of sorrow-soaked blues, there exists a face that doesn't merely sing about pain, it embodies it. When you study the rare photographs of Blind Willie Johnson, what unsettles you first is not the feral intensity of his slide guitar, but his eyes, pale as chalked limestone, stripped of all warmth. His blindness was no poetic nickname. It was the brutal aftermath of a chemical attack in his own family kitchen. As a child, caught in a moment of vengeful fury aimed at his father, his stepmother hurled a basin of caustic lye water straight into young Willie's face. The burning chemicals instantly destroyed his vision, searing away pigment and pupils alike, leaving behind two ghostly white hollows that stood in terrifying contrast to his dark skin. By the late 1920s, as his first records echoed across the American South, rumors began to circulate that Willie Johnson was not blind in any ordinary sense. Many whispered that those limestone eyes marked a pact with darkness itself. Legend claimed that when his sight was taken, he gained something far more unsettling, a spiritual vision. Those who met him spoke of an eerie sensation, insisting his white eyes were not empty at all, but searching, as if they could see through flesh and into the most buried secrets of the soul. Texas folklore swore that when his slide guitar cried and his gravelly voice rose, Willie was witnessing beings from another realm. His limestone eyes became a symbol of otherworldly clairvoyance, transforming him into a blind prophet who guided listeners through humanity's deepest anguish with a vision the rest of us could never possess. Stepin Fetchit, the magician of the melting face. Leaving behind the eerie stillness of Willie Johnson, we step into an anatomical spectacle so bizarre it seems to mock the limits of human form. Lincoln Perry, known to the world by his stage name Stepin Fetchit, possessed a face that appeared almost boneless. A slack, liquid mask that defied every rule of human anatomy. Branded the man with the plastic face, Fetchit displayed a surreal mastery over his facial muscles in the black and white films of the 1930s. Cameras of the era captured unnerving moments. His eyes turning glassy and unbearably heavy, lids sagging as if he were slipping into a coma, while his mouth stretched and drooped in ways that seemed to ignore the very existence of a jaw. On studio sets, whispers spread among technicians. Some swore his skull was hollow, others believed his facial muscles weren't attached to bone at all. Behind the scenes, stories grew darker, accounts of moments when his face didn't merely suggest foolishness but visibly warped, collapsing and flowing like wax held to an open flame. The sight was so grotesque it left witnesses shaken. This wasn't just performance. It felt like a sudden, unnatural distortion that forced everyone watching to wonder, was that face made of flesh and blood, or something eerie and unexplainable, something science had no name for? Dizzy Gillespie, the virtuoso with the ballooned cheeks. As the spotlight locked onto him, the audience didn't just hold its breath for the piercing highs of his trumpet. They held it to witness something unsettling unfold in real time, a transformation that happened in a single, terrifying second under the force of his own breath. His face seemed to abandon the rules of anatomy, collapsing and reforming into something grotesque, almost otherworldly, a hybrid creation that looked like it had escaped from the strangest biology lab of the 20th century. The epicenter of this visual shock was his cheeks, swelling to an absurd, unnatural size, like twin balloons stretched to the brink of rupture right on his face. The distortion was so severe it erased the very outline of his jaw, forcing his neck to bulge outward, reptilian, as if his body were instinctively trying to survive its own pressure. The truth behind this frightening spectacle wasn't just raw trumpet technique. It was a painful medical condition, a laryngocele, discovered when doctors realized that decades of relentless air force had literally torn apart the natural structure of his face, turning his cheek muscles into hollow air sacs that could no longer contract. Whispers of something almost supernatural living inside those deformed cheeks followed him everywhere, turning each performance into a chilling visual ordeal. The crowd sat frozen, eyes locked on the stage, not only listening to the music, but silently wondering whether that stretched, fragile skin could endure even 1 second longer without finally giving way. Jelly Roll Morton. Jelly Roll Morton, the diamond grin and the chill of the shadows. If the oddities of earlier legends felt like the work of fate or time gone crooked, Morton chose to inscribe obsession onto his own face, an indulgence as lavish as it was unnerving. Declaring himself the inventor of jazz, he aimed for more than mastery of sound. He wanted dominion. He wanted his very face to found a dynasty of authority, a power that could intimidate at first glance. The terror behind that smile was no defect but an ornament steeped in omen, a solid diamond set forever into his front tooth. In the low-lit clubs of early 20th century New Orleans, whenever Morton flashed that arrogant grin, the stone caught the wavering light and fired back cold sparks that sliced through the dark against his deep complexion. The effect was grotesque yet mesmerizing, as if his mouth held a captive force, something otherworldly glowing between his teeth. To claim that unnatural light, Morton endured the brutal agony of primitive, hand-cut dental surgery, a delirious sacrifice of flesh to achieve an almost inhuman presence. In the sinful corridors of Storyville, whispers spread with a hint of voodoo. The diamond was a conduit, they said, letting Morton read the cards, rule the gambling dens, and cast a hypnotic spell on anyone reckless enough to stare into his mouth while he played. Eartha Kitt. The Black Panther made flesh, all primal feline power and lethal grace. Long before she rose as a Hollywood sex symbol, Eartha Kitt was an anthropomorphic enigma who shattered every conventional rule of beauty. Her look was unmistakably cat-like, her face etched with the instincts of a natural predator. This was no illusion, no trick of lighting or costume. It was written into her DNA, radiating danger and untamed wildness at first sight. At the center of that hypnotic strangeness were her upturned eyes, their outer corners stretching toward her temples, forming a gaze so cold and piercing it felt almost surgical. Paired with razor-sharp cheekbones and a pointed, predatory chin, her features seemed to pull inward, tightening toward the center of her face in dramatic tension. That singular bone structure turned Eartha Kitt into something uncanny, a hybrid suspended between woman and beast. Her stare was never passive, it was an act of domination. And when that visual power merged with her signature growling vocals, she became a seduction bordering on the demonic. This was beauty not born of softness or balance, but of sharpness, so extreme it felt like nature itself had bent the rules, leaving audiences breathless every time she stepped into the light. Billy Kersons, known to the 19th century as the man with the giant mouth, a living black hole of human anatomy. In the world of minstrel shows, His name became synonymous with one of the most astonishing physical anomalies ever witnessed on stage. Unlike performers who relied on sharp features or polished looks, Curson's commanded attention through something far more unsettling, a mouth that seemed to defy the very limits of human biology. His oral cavity could stretch to surreal proportions. On stage, he stunned and disturbed audiences by calmly stuffing multiple billiard balls, or even an entire tea set, into his mouth, all while casually continuing his monologue. The sight was so shocking, so irresistible, that by the 1880s it sparked an unprecedented social phenomenon. Across the segregated American South, theater owners were forced to bend the rigid rules of racial separation. White and black audiences packed the same halls, shoulder to shoulder, united by disbelief and dread, holding their breath as they watched the terrifying elasticity of that monstrous mouth. It was a grotesque spectacle with a strange power, one that compelled prejudice itself to step aside in the face of raw human curiosity. Manton Moreland. The first shock always came from the eyes, those eerie, bulging eyes that seemed to defy anatomy itself. In Hollywood's black and white era, Moreland carved out a haunting personal brand through a bizarre and unforgettable skill, the deliberate manipulation of his eyeballs, a trick the industry nicknamed the Popeye technique. This was no simple mugging for laughs or exaggerated look of fear. It was a near-mechanical mutation of control, allowing his eyes to dilate and thrust outward so unnaturally that they appeared on the verge of slipping from their sockets. The effect delivered a jolt of visual terror in the B-movies of the 1930s and 1940s, most notably in the Charlie Chan film series. When Moreland unleashed this technique, the whites of his eyes swallowed the entire socket, producing a bone-chilling image, like a man possessed, or someone staring straight into a nightmare from beyond the grave. Though Hollywood confined him to racially stereotyped comic roles, what audiences were really witnessing was a physical performance discipline refined to an almost cellular level. Moreland's eyes were never just a gag. They embodied a disturbing form of biological command, blurring the boundary between human mastery and grotesque mutation. And that deformation left behind an unsettling question. Was this simply the result of relentless practice? Or did Manton Moreland's nervous system harbor a rare code for controlling flesh and bone that science still cannot fully explain? Fats Domino. A face like a full moon, where every sharp edge seemed to quietly vanish. While other legends linger in our memory through scars, angles, or striking bone structures, Fats Domino drew us into an entirely different kind of mystery, the near-total absence of edges. His face existed as a singular anthropometric marvel, rounded to such an extreme that the eye struggled to locate a jawline, a cheekbone, or any of the familiar landmarks of the human skull. This extraordinary softness, paired with his warm, glowing skin and ever-present smile, turned his face into a perfect sphere beneath the stage lights. The effect was uncanny and unforgettable, radiating kindness and comfort while at the same time stirring a deeper fascination. How could a living human form achieve such rare, almost mathematical harmony? Jack Johnson, the cast bronze face and the golden glare of violence. Forget everything you think you know about a typical boxer. Before the cold eye of 1910's camera lenses, Jack Johnson did not simply appear. He erupted. He looked less like a man and more like a war engine forged from black bronze, his facial structure so brutally unreal it seemed hammered out in a devil's forge rather than shaped by human hands. The stoic hardness etched into his face was not a gift of birth. It was earned through the merciless collision of blood, sweat, and steel-heavy punches hurled across hundreds of brutal bouts. His skin shone with the polish of cast metal, not from vanity, but from thick layers of scar tissue stacked over years of fights that balanced on the edge between life and death. A high, jagged brow carved deep-set sockets that trapped a stare so ferocious it could suffocate an opponent's courage before the first bell rang. Yet the true secret, the source of the ring's terror and that unforgettable visual shock, revealed itself only when he parted his lips. Picture a dark, gleaming, battle-worn face, mapped with scars like a battlefield. Then, suddenly, a defiant grin ignites the darkness, unveiling a chilling treasure, rows of teeth encased in solid, blazing gold. Jack Johnson didn't conquer championship belts with fists alone. He weaponized his scars, his presence, and that haunting golden flash to launch a psychological assault before a single punch was thrown. His opponents didn't feel like they were fighting a man. They felt as though they were standing before a war god cast in black bronze. Little Richard. Step into the dazzling, chaotic, and utterly surreal world of Little Richard in the 1950s. This wasn't just a performer, it was a force defying every expectation, every rule of the human form. His appearance was a bold, bizarre manifesto. A face layered in makeup so thick it seemed to erase emotion, eyes framed in deep black eyeliner that trapped every glance, a mustache as thin and sharp as a stroke of ink, turning skin into a canvas of extreme theatricality. But the real shock, what left cameras frozen and audiences gasping, was his signature expression, the shocked face. In the heat of performance, Little Richard's features would seize in a moment of pure astonishment so intense it felt unreal. Eyes widened past human limits, whites blazing like twin crescents, lips frozen in a silent scream. This spectacle hit its peak in 1956, every time Tutti Frutti climbed the charts and he lit up the television screen. That statue-like face, that blazing stare, those eyes staring straight into infinity, it transformed him into a living enigma, a theatrical doll possessed by the raw, unstoppable energy of rock and roll, every muscle a rebellion against the ordinary. Winnie Harlow. Winnie Harlow, the living paradox of beauty and the eerie poetry of nature. Unlike faces that captivate through sculpted bone or chiseled features, Winnie stops the world in its tracks with a breathtaking canvas of pigment in motion. She lives with vitiligo, a condition where her skin's pigment cells vanish, leaving patterns of pure white across her body. But what leaves scientists, anthropologists, and artists spellbound isn't just the condition, it's the uncanny symmetry of the depigmented patches on her face. These patches don't appear by chance. They cradle her eyes, trace the bridge of her nose, and outline her lips with an almost supernatural precision. Staring into the camera, her face seems divided by an invisible artist's hand, a negative mask perfectly etched over her deep, rich complexion. It's not disease, it's a living masterpiece, an abstract work of light and shadow painted by nature itself. When she walked onto America's Next Top Model in 2014, the world paused. People didn't just see a model, they glimpsed a new aesthetic, a mysterious code written in the human form. Was it a cruel cellular quirk, or a radical experiment by nature, redefining what beauty could truly mean? Francisco Domingo Joaquim, known to the world as Chainho, the man with the widest mouth ever recorded. His story is a journey into a medical marvel, a rare mutation that stunned modern science. Chainho's jaw and oral structure defied all known limits of human biology. The most astonishing moment came in 2010 when he achieved something that seemed physically impossible. He effortlessly fit a soda can horizontally into his mouth. In that instant, it felt as if his entire face was swallowed by an endless void. This extraordinary ability earned him a spot in the Guinness World Records as the man with the widest mouth on Earth. These are just 13 incredible stories that push the boundaries of what we thought was possible in human anatomy. Moments where nature seems to rewrite the rules, experimenting boldly on the human body. If these stories spark your curiosity and you want to dive deeper into the hidden wonders of the world, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Drop a comment with the stories you want us to uncover next, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an exciting adventure.